Hey, for the next 20 minutes, you'll be listening to an inspiring conversation with our podcast guest. Bonus materials are waiting for you in the link in the YouTube description.
So we're joined today by Viktoria Altman, who's the head of BSPE Marketing, and they specialize in all things legal, SEO, and working with lawyers across the United States.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Sarah. I really appreciate it.
No worries. How was your trip over here?
It was great. So I stopped by in Paris first for a few days.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it was a great trip so far.
That's good. When are you heading back?
Going back to Paris for 8 hours, and I'm armed with a credit card. Ooh. So I will be spending 8 hours in Paris shopping. So hoping to do some real damage.
That sounds amazing, but also dangerous at the same time.
Yes. But I like to live on the edge.
Do it. Only live once. Anyway, so that I don't spend the whole time talking about shopping with you. On to the questions. So, your background's really interesting. So you started a business in the Soviet Union when you were 12, and then you retired when you were 36.
Yes.
And then unretired 2 weeks later.
Yeah, it turns out retirement is really boring at 36 when everybody else is working.
Okay.
And the only people retired are in their 60s, so It was boring.
I'd love to retire, but I think you have a valid point there. From a business perspective, how has this unconventional journey kind of shaped your philosophy on business?
It's a really good question. I think that the one thing I've learned is to fail quickly. And I know it's almost, a whole lot of people say this, but when you start a business, you're really not guaranteed to succeed, right? But if you don't succeed, if you fail, if you learn something, then you haven't actually failed. And so while I have had some success, I failed a lot more than I've succeeded. But that's okay, because in my line of work, even if you succeed 10% of the time, you're good, right? I'm not a fireman or a cop where if you fail, you really fail. You know what I mean? So for a business person, I think it's really important to accept failure as a part of success.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one, because I've run a couple of businesses myself, and I have to say, even if I don't do them now, the lessons that I've learned have been so valuable. Even the little things that I didn't think would be useful. I absolutely hated accounting. Absolutely hated it with an absolute passion. But now I'm like, okay, this is actually quite useful that I know how to do all this stuff. And makes you more valuable as an employee, I think, as well, no matter what kind of journey you take.
Yeah.
And does your unconventional journey shape the idea of kind of done is a new perfect? Because that's something you talk about quite a lot in your presentations and slides and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I'm a natural perfectionist. A lot of us women are kind of almost conditioned to be perfectionists, right?
Oh yeah, I can relate.
And what I've come to learn is that you don't have to have something perfect. So you got to get there, about 80% of the way. And if you get there 80% of the way, you're usually doing it better than pretty much anybody in your field. And by having something that's not quite perfect, you always leave yourself room to grow. And you're always leaving yourself room to improve, and you create opportunity cost to move on to something else.
I love that. That's a really good way of looking at it. And as well, keeping to the idea of kind of businesses, what are some of the, core business principles that you stand by, even in the world of kind of automation and technological advances and stuff like that?
Yeah, so, my business has changed entirely in the past 2 years, right? All of ours has. Ever since ChatGPT, 3.5 came out, everything we do now in marketing is very, very different. But I do think that there are some things that don't change, right? And done is better than perfect is one of them. But also, constantly testing new ideas, bringing them to market quickly in order to be able to see what's going to work and what's not going to work. Hyper-focusing on automation and making sure that the things that can be taken care of by low-level processes, machines, are being taken care of, and then allowing the humans to really lean into their humanity and just to really focus on what we do best, which is social interaction. I can't automate a salesperson, but I can automate a email sequence, right? So there's quite a few things there, but I do think that if a lot of the business lessons that I have now, that I'm using now, have been around for hundreds of years. And some things just really don't change.
Yeah, I don't know if about you, but like with me personally, when it comes to marketing and stuff, I'm finding that I'm kind of going back more towards, say, the traditional marketing theories that you had like 50, 60, 70 years ago, compared to kind of some of the stuff that people talk about today, just because it's such a differentiator, and people don't think about it anymore and kind of forget that those kind of things still work.
Right. Some of my favorite marketing books are from the 70s and the 80s.
Oh, same. I love them.
Yeah, like in the age of, the golden person-to-person marketing.
Yep.
And when they wrote these very long letters to potential consumers and they got them in the mail order, you can use some of those principles in Facebook posts.
Oh, totally.
And they work.
Yeah.
They still work because it's just psychology. I like to say marketing is the world's second oldest profession. And there are some things in marketing that will never change. And I know people are worried about us losing our jobs with AI. But I think as long as there's humans to sell to, if you're good, you will have a job.
I think so as well. And I think, that, as you mentioned, the whole psychology, the whole human side of things, AI cannot replace that. So as long as a marketer, you keep that in mind, I think people are going to be...
Yeah, exactly.
Be okay. And when we were in Saigon, you did a talk and you started off with kind of like the Segway analogy and how that was kind of hyped up to be the best product in the world, and then it ended up kind of flopping. How do you think marketing teams can ensure they're identifying and validating a market need before investing like all of their time and money and everything like they did with the Segway?
So Segway is actually a really famous business case. I didn't come up with it. It's studied in business schools throughout the world, right? So with Segway, what they did was they made a couple of different errors. The first one, they assumed that the market would create itself. So they just kind of said, we'll create this beautiful product and all these people who don't like walking are going to take a Segway. So they just imagined the whole market of people who don't like walking, which is ridiculous, right? Because you should have really spoken to people, but they were scared of somebody coming into the market and taking their idea.
Yep.
What's interesting about this is there's a new, I don't know if you saw this a couple of days ago, OpenAI just bought a company. And the company is a hardware company that OpenAI bought in secret, and it is not known what they're developing. But OpenAI says they will put ChatGPT on it and allow humans to interface with the real world via this hardware. And nobody knows what it is. And it's it's actually designed under secrets. And the Segway parallels are there because Segway was also designed under secret. Well, listen, we'll see what happens, right? This Altman guy, no relation, unfortunately. I wish he was like my brother or something, but no relation to me. He's a smart guy, so maybe he knows what he's doing. But I'm seeing a lot of the same parallels. Another piece of hardware, no testing, no real market research. So I think, maybe OpenAI can afford to lose a few $1 billion, but as a small business owner, you can't.
Yep.
So you have to take a small product, put it out there, minimum viable product, right? Test it with a market, and then if you need to, you can make it better. And if you don't need to, you have failed with a product, you haven't invested millions. Actually, last year I failed with a product. It was called Follow-Up Wiz, and what we were doing is an automated follow-up system. And we had it designed basically in Zapier. And what we found is that people don't necessarily want to pay for that system. And I actually didn't lose any money on it at all because we ended up having some clients. So things like that, we can work as a small business, we can churn our ship much faster, right?
Yep.
Whereas, $1 billion company maybe can't. So we have to take advantage of what we can.
You're halfway through the podcast and still haven't grabbed the bonus content.
That's a really good point. And do you have any tips for people kind of how to test things before they get that far, or what they need to do to avoid kind of, another Segway issue?
Yeah, so what I do to test products is I approach my favorite clients and I say, look, this is a new product. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to sell it to you at such a deep discount that for you, it's going to make sense. And then I'm going to sell it to you. Obviously, this is already a functioning product. Like, I'm not selling them something that doesn't work at all. But I'm saying, I don't know if it's going to be useful. And if you say it's not useful, no problem. You know what I mean? Like, I might even give them a refund or something. But I just want a real world case study. You can approach your friends and just give it to them for a few bucks. Not free, because free is, people don't value free. And test it out and then get feedback. And you don't need to have 200 people, for a case study. You could have 2 people, you have 3 people. And if it's not useful for them, maybe it's not going to be useful. There is always opportunity cost. There's always better products out there.
It's a really good point. And to be honest, I love a good MVP to go in and test it before, you get too far or you invest in it too much. So I think that's a really good point. And in your talk as well, you talked a lot about kind of AI and that people need to be using AI or, they'll perish. Basically, how do businesses plan to invest in automation and how do they make sure that they're doing it the right way? What would you recommend?
Again, speaking from a viewpoint of a small business, now I'm not running a Fortune 100 company here. My advice is not to overinvest in automation, but to take other people's automations and use them in your business. I know quite a few people right now who are investing a lot of money in building their own automations. And in 6 months from now, right, today is the worst AI we will ever use, right? It's one of the things I mentioned. 6 months from now, a year from now, even from when we were in Vietnam, there are better automations available, And so if you're going to invest a lot of money into technology, which is constantly improving, you're probably not going to end up on the right side of the budgetary line if you're a small business. So instead, take the stuff other people are using and maybe adapt it for yourself.
Yeah, because I see that as quite a common problem, especially, in my home market. That people kind of see the buzzword of AI and they're like, right, I need to build all these systems. And you ask them, how much did you spend on it? And they're like loads and loads of money. And I was like, does it make things, did you save time? Did you sort, your processes out with it? And they're like, no, it took us longer and it's not very good. It's like,
Right. Yeah, and I do talk about that. You have to make sure that you actually have a process to solve. You have a problem to solve. And then when you automate it, you have to compare the amount of time it takes you versus the amount of time it took you before.
I think people forget about that a lot.
I think we all get involved in shiny object syndrome. And it's so exciting and it's so new. But look, in the end of the day, we're here in business to support our families, to support our clients, to support our employees' families. It's our responsibilities as the boss to make sure that we do the right thing by the company. And if you're over-investing time or money in something and you're not even sure it's working, then you're not spending your time or money on the right things.
No, completely agree with you on that. And I've seen that happen so many times. And I think as an industry, sometimes we're a bit guilty of kind of jumping on the bandwagon and, adopting things before, maybe you do have a good business case and stuff. So love the points that you're talking about kind of maybe slowing down a bit, making sure that, you do have proper use cases for it.
Yes.
Another question I've got kind of on that note as well is, what strategies can marketers employ to make sure that they're building systems that are, resilient, adaptable, rather than just, something that becomes outdated too quickly?
Yeah. So we start with very small processes, right? We'll take something that's taken us way too long and make a small automated process for it. And then we build on top of it. So maybe we take an SOP and maybe we automate, parts 8 through 10, and there is also 30 other parts. Is it making faster? We track the time? Is it making the job faster? Yes, it is. Okay. So now how about we automate tasks 5 through 8? And we're building, it's almost like building a house. Again, because we have limited time, we have limited resources, we can't afford to go in and build a whole system. But by attacking small parts of the SOP that take the longest time and are probably the most boring for humans, we're able to sort of really focus our resources on where it needs to go.
I like that. Again, in your presentations, you talked about things like small gains, small consistent improvements and things like that. How do you personally convince a team or leadership to embrace, the philosophy of small rather than, going in and investing everything or just going massive?
Yeah, so with my company, I mean, I'm the boss, so I basically whatever say goes. But I do feel that there needs to be a buy-in from employees, right? Because sometimes they might even be scared they could lose their job, right? And so I think the pushback that I could expect to get would be, oh, why do we need to automate this when we can do this by hand? Because I don't want to lose my job. And what I tell my employees is, look, you guys are some of the smartest people in the world. They're all smarter than I am, by far. You will have higher level work when we automate this because there's always projects. There's always more marketing we could do for other industries, for other kinds of clients, for other types of products, you know. So by automating things, by automating small things, we open ourselves up to bigger opportunities. And, you know, rather than having transformed the entire company overnight, we're doing it little by little.
That's such a good point as well. And like you also, when it comes to automation, you often talk about, you know, tracking time first and then simplifying and documenting processes and things like that. Why is documentation and simplifying things so important?
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of jumped through the SOPs, but look, here's the thing, right? If you don't have a proper time tracking and documentation of processes, then how do you know what you're doing even makes sense to automate? How do you even know you should? What if you don't need to do it at all? What if you could just get rid of it? So in our automation process, what we do is we examine the SOP and we weigh in. Do we still need these parts, right? A lot of people have SOPs and maybe they were written years ago before AI, you know, or maybe parts of them were written before AI. So we go in and we say, oh, do we still need to be doing things this way? And before we even start with automation, we may cut out processes, we may simplify processes that are still being done by hand, but maybe don't need to be done at all. And we do track, you know, I will track how much a project takes, how much that specific SOP takes for months. And then I know exactly, like it's supposed to take an hour and a half. So when we go in and automate and it's now taking an hour, you know, on average, then we know the automation has worked.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I think again, another very good point. I think people often forget to do, you know, time tracking and things like that.
Yeah.
Just to double check that it is, you know, working.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a quick one on the process of, you know, we've talked about a lot of like things businesses should be doing, some things that maybe they should be doing slightly better. Have you seen any business cases or any examples of people, you know, trying to automate things that maybe they shouldn't?
Yes.
A lot. Says it all.
I've had so many of my friends be like, I'm automating this really cool SEO process. And I'm like, well, do you know if it works? And it's almost like they're so involved in the tech that they forget the whole point of it is supposed to be to accomplish something. Like, don't get so caught up in the tech, you know? Sometimes we see the trees very, very clearly and we're missing the forest because we're not even looking at the forest. Focus on the big picture and make sure things you're automating actually make sense for your agency.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And what are some of the potential pitfalls of kind of like over automating?
Well, so the one pitfall that I could imagine is you are taking away what we call newbie tasks. So I think a lot of companies are now finding that they can automate the very beginning tasks for pretty much any job. Problem is, when you don't have humans doing those very beginning tasks, the human can't grow. So if I don't have very simple things, how can they ever become managers? Because they've never done the simple work. And I think that's a real threat for a lot of companies, right? We're all excited to get this stuff done faster and cheaper, but you still have to leave some tasks that could be automated for humans because it is a learning process for them. And if you want creativity, if you want somebody to come up years later and say, hey, maybe we could implement this, it means they have to start somewhere. So I would say for many companies right now, they're facing those college level jobs. That's going to be a big downfall right now for a lot of us.
True. And to finish off, basically, for marketing people listening, what is the single most important mindset shift that people need to make in order to kind of cultivate and be successful when it comes to automation and AI?
I would say it's to go back to what we discussed. Marketing is marketing. you're selling to a human being, and you are, and I know you spoke about dark psychology during your presentation in Vietnam. There are ways to market to a human that a machine is not going to come up with, right? You and I are having a conversation maybe one day, but right now a machine is not capable of that. Lean into your humanity, lean in the things you can do that a machine cannot, and focus on those. Because look, everybody can produce hundreds of pages of content a second now, right? That doesn't make you special. Producing more content is not going to make you special. But being able to talk to people, being able to come up with ideas that are creative and completely out of the blue, that's a different story. I mean, AI, as of right now, it's still generative. It's still only taking people's ideas and kind of remodeling them. So lean into humanity and automate the things that don't need humanity.
I think that's a perfect way to finish off. Thank you so much for joining us. And finally, for people listening, where can they find you?
Oh, thanks so much, Sarah. They can connect with me on Facebook, Viktoria Altman, and LinkedIn, same thing, Viktoria Altman, or my website, bspelegalmarketing.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.